Okay, let's talk about something called Wiskott Aldrich syndrome. It's a name you might not have heard before, and for good reason. It's pretty rare. But here's the thing. It all starts with this one tiny microscopic flaw in our DNA. And its impact? Well, it's anything but small. It can completely reshape the lives of the families it touches. So, we're going to explore how this tiny little error creates such a massive ripple effect.
Yeah, you see, this isn't just a medical condition we're talking about. It really is a journey. And it's a journey that takes us from the absolute smallest scale imaginable, a single mutated gene on a chromosome, all the way out to the day-to-day reality of an entire family. It's a story about biology, but it's also a story about people. All right, so to really get a handle on this, we've got to go right back to the beginning, to its genetic origins. Let's start with Section 1, a flaw in the code.
So let's start with the basics. What exactly is Wiskott Aldrich syndrome? Well, you'll often hear it called WAS for short, and it's a rare genetic disorder of the immune system that almost exclusively affects boys. You can think of it as a double whammy. It messes with the immune system, making it hard to fight off infections, and it reduces the body's ability to form blood clots.
Okay, to find the root cause, we really need to zoom in. I mean, way in, right down to our body's own instruction manual. You got it. We're talking about DNA. It's the blueprint inside every single one of our cells that tells it what to do, how to work, how to function.
And the cause is incredibly specific. It's not some huge system-wide failure. Nope. It all comes down to one single gene, the WASP gene. This little instruction is located on the X chromosome, and its only job is to tell the body how to build a really important protein called, you guessed it, WASP. Now, this WASP protein is a huge deal. Seriously, think of it like a cell's communications officer. It's sitting there, waiting for signals from the outside. When it gets one, its job is to shout those orders down to the cell's internal scaffolding, this thing called the actin skeleton. This is what lets the cell move, change its shape, and get things done. But if that communications officer isn't there or isn't working right, the cell gets a signal, and nothing happens. It's deaf. It can't respond. It can't move properly to fight off invaders. The whole system breaks down. So, I mentioned earlier this mostly affects boys, right? And you might be wondering, why? Well, the answer is in our sex chromosomes. It's pretty straightforward. Girls have two X chromosomes. You see it there, XX. And boys have one X and one Y. That one little difference is absolutely key to understanding how this whole thing is inherited. Okay, so remember how we said the WAS gene is on the X chromosome? Well, think about it. If a boy inherits an X chromosome with that faulty gene, that's it. He doesn't have another X to fall back on. There's no backup copy, so he's going to be affected by the disease. But a girl, she's got that second X chromosome. So if one has the mutation, the other one can usually pick up the slack. This means she becomes a carrier, but she typically doesn't show any symptoms herself.
So what does this mean for a family? Well, this number, 50%, is huge. If a mother is a carrier of the mutated WAS gene, it's basically a coin flip for each child, every time. Each of her sons has a 50% chance of having the disease, and each of her daughters has a 50% chance of being a carrier, just like her. But here's a twist. It's not always inherited. You'd think it would be, right? But in about a third of cases, the mutation is what scientists call de novo, which basically means it's brand new. It just happens, completely out of the blue for the very first time in that child. That's why a family can get a WAS diagnosis for their son even when there's absolutely no history of it on either side of the family. It can be a complete shock. Okay, so we've seen the flaw in the code, we know where it comes from, now let's look at what it actually does. This is Section 2, the body's ripple effect. How does that one tiny mistake spread out and cause problems all over the body?
Doctors often talk about a classic triad of symptoms for WAS. Think of it as the big three. First, you have issues with platelets. They're too low and they're too small, which leads to easy bleeding and bruising. Second, because that communications officer in the immune cells isn't working, you get infections. Over and over again, bacterial, viral, fungal, you name it. And third, there's eczema, that itchy, inflammatory skin disease.
So bleeding, infections, and eczema. That's it, right? Is that the whole story? Not even close. As with so many of these complex conditions, that classic triad is really just the tip of the iceberg.
So what's lurking below the surface? Well, a lot, actually.
Beyond those main three, patients are at risk for other really serious problems. Sometimes the faulty immune system gets so confused that it just turns on the body itself. That's what autoimmune diseases are. And then there's the other big one. Sadly, there's a much higher risk of developing certain cancers, particularly blood cancers like lymphoma or leukemia.
So with all these different symptoms flying around, how in the world did doctors figure out what's going on? That brings us right into Section 3, decoding the diagnosis.
The process of figuring this out is almost like a detective story. The first clue usually pops up when a young boy has a really low platelet count. The technical term is thrombocytopenia. But here's the key. The fastest test isn't just counting the platelets, it's measuring them. In WAS, they're not just low, they're abnormally small. That's a huge telltale sign. From there, more blood tests will look at the levels of different antibodies or immunoglobulins, and that usually seals the deal.
Okay, so once a family has a diagnosis, the next big question is, what do we do about it? And this part of the story, thankfully, is a much more hopeful one. Welcome to Section 4, a story of progress. I mean, the difference between the past and the present here is just night and day. If you go back just a few decades, a WAS diagnosis was devastating, with very few good options. But today, it's a completely different world. Thanks to these incredible leaps in our understanding of genetics and the immune system, the quality of life, the long-term outlook, it has all been completely transformed for the better.
So modern treatments really fall into two big camps. On the one hand, you have managing the symptoms, kind of like playing defense. This means things like antibody infusions to help fight infections or platelet transfusions to prevent bleeding. But for the more severe cases, there are now options that are actually curative. I'm talking about things like bone marrow transplants and even cutting-edge gene therapy where they go in and fix the faulty gene itself. It's incredible stuff.
So we've gone through all the science, the symptoms, the treatments, but a diagnosis like this isn't just a medical chart. It's a life. It's a family. So for our final section, let's zoom out and talk about what this is really all about, the family's journey.
Living with a chronic illness like this, it pulls at the fabric of the whole family. And this quote really gets to the heart of one of the toughest parts. It says, "Some children struggle with how much time their parents spend with their sick brother." And you can just imagine that, can't you? It's a tough, tough reality for siblings who might feel a little lost in the shuffle when so much energy and attention has to go to their brother.
But, and this is so important, there's another side to the coin. Here's another quote. Many families say that Wiskott Aldrich syndrome has brought them closer together. And isn't that amazing? In the face of what seems like an impossible challenge, so many families find this incredible new level of strength and connection. That shared fight can forge bonds that are just unbelievably strong.
And really, that's what this journey is all about in the end, isn't it? It's a balance. It's being honest about the tough stuff, the challenges, but also grabbing onto those moments of connection, those opportunities to grow stronger. And when families do that, when they acknowledge both sides, they help all their kids build this deep, powerful resilience that will last a lifetime.
And so that leaves us with this one last big question to think about. This whole journey starts with a tiny flaw in the code, a biological mistake. But somehow it can end up revealing something profound about the human spirit. It really makes you wonder, how does a family's absolute greatest challenge end up becoming its greatest strength?